Hard launch into Twig and Jenkins.
Hard launch with our favorite congressperson in America, Sarah McBride. Let's go. Three
Wow, that is.
cheers.
I've never heard a more stinging indictment of Congress than calling me favorite member of Congress.
Nope. You're number one, Sarah. You're number one.
That's a low bar then.
Hilarious. Hilarious. Well, we all know Brad is outrageously enthusiastic about you, but also just in general.
This is true.
So
what you're saying
in our family, we call it adjectival escalation. Everything is the best. Every meal is the best. Everything is the best. And Brad, I guess you could just be a McBride then.
There you go. So Jenkins is actually a McBride. You have a new member of the family because adjectival
escalation.
Adjectival escalation. That's basically, Brad, that should be your Twitter bio.
That should be the t-shirt, the Twig and Jenkins t-shirt. That is me in a nutshell. But we are so fired up and honored to have Congresswoman McBride, Sarah McBride, the one and only. And we are all a part of the White House OPE family. Let's just start there. They tell you, this is the thing, when you start working at the White House, they say, be very nice to your interns because they will be running the country one day. And I love that, Sarah, it's all happening. So congratulations.
Yeah, Sarah's a member of Congress, and we are like rinky-dink podcasters sitting in our living rooms.
True. This is true.
You guys are killing it. You guys are killing it. And I loved my experience in OP. It was grueling, but you can't spell hope without OPE.
Let's go. Let's go.
Guys, cool it. All right.
Let's go.
That's so funny.
Where do we start, Sarah? We don't have a ton of time with you. We know you have so much to do. Huge shouts to the event you just had with Senator Coons on the Medicaid cuts. And this is a harrowing time for America. But I'd love to just hear, because you and I have not talked since you made history and since America is in, late stage democracy. So I'd love to just hear, how's your mental health in this moment, Congresswoman?
Well, I think I'm hanging in there is about the only answer to how are you doing that I can give. On the one hand, I am truly awe-inspired at the privilege that I have right now. I feel the responsibility every single day in the best of ways and also in the heaviest of ways, because it is a hard time and it is a depressing time for really all of us who care about democracy, compassion, human lives. And I think it's easy to become cynical in this moment. And I think we are all facing these crises of hope. But I think, what I take as hard as it is for all of us in this moment, one of the things I am grateful for is that, I go into the Capitol and I sit on the House floor and I think about the challenges that predecessors of mine, that previous generations of Americans faced. They moved into that chamber in 1857, just before the Civil War. That is a place where they passed the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, where women got the right to vote, where the New Deal was passed. The chairs that I sit in are the chairs that members of Congress who voted for the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act sat in. And those challenges that they face, those moments, those crises of hope, the fact that they could not see the light at the end of the tunnel in the midst of those crises, I find comfort in that fact, because every single previous generation persevered. They summoned their hope. They found the light and they changed the world under seemingly impossible odds. And I gotta believe we can do that too. So that's what I try to bring myself back to stay balanced.
I'm
That's
glad
so
we're recording because I'm going to play that every morning because I wake up in the fetal position, Congresswoman. So I'm just going to play that.
I do too, but that's just how I sleep.
more of a running state.
Exactly.
Before we get into some of your like specific policy initiatives, one of the questions that I have is I think it's inescapable in this moment to there seems to be a real disconnect between people on the outside who are like, what are we doing, what's the strategy, what's happening, and then what happens on the inside. Critiques are going both ways. As someone who has been a staffer, a candidate, a local elected, who is in close proximity to advocates and to activists and to sort of everyone in the ecosystem, what do you think is important for people like us on the outside, whether it's kind of setting aside media, but just like people who care about the fate
Yeah.
of the world, who don't feel connected to Congress, who don't know members of Congress, and are sort of like, I don't understand what's happening over there. What could you tell them about like what your experience is like on the inside as you guys are articulating a strategy in this moment?
Sure. Well, I mean, I'll talk first about sort of the strategy and the approach, and then also why I think talking about what's happening in Congress just cannot encapsulate what needs to happen in this moment. So,
Perfect.
look, I know that folks are scared and rightfully frustrated. And I don't believe over the first couple of months of the administration, the party writ large has found the right balance. I think there is larger consensus about the right approach, but operationalizing that is a much more difficult endeavor. I think the strategy is that in an environment where they are flooding the zone, in an environment where there's an attention economy and it's difficult to break through, what is clear is that we can't fight every fight. We do have to pick our battles, focus our energies, focus our message. Yes, the way we message will be different, but if we are talking about the same thing, like we have been with Medicaid, it can break through, it can shift public opinion. We have to fight hard and fight smart. And we have to recognize that in order to shift public opinion, we're going to have to shift some folks who voted for Donald Trump. And we have to recognize that there are going to be fights that might feel viscerally comforting to us, but aren't actually constructive in shifting public opinion and might actually result in people tuning us out and undermining our capacity to shift public opinion. We have to recognize that and not fall into the trap of seeing risk and always going, if I can identify a risk with a fight or with an approach or with a decision, that means I shouldn't pursue that fight. Because I think when people are sort of strategizing about how to move forward, what they often will fall into is the decision of inertia, the decision of passiveness, because they aren't able to actually fully grapple with how to measure and evaluate risk. And I think sometimes what we have seen is that people go, if I can identify a risk, that means we shouldn't fight the fight. And I think, unfortunately, we saw that with the continuing resolution. I think that was a prime example of, look, understandable risk, like not wrong in evaluating and identifying that risk, but there are only so many levers at our disposal. There, institutionally, as members of Congress, there are all of the risks that people are saying might materialize, they're already doing. And they don't need us to do or say things in order to justify illegal actions. Because even if we don't do it, they will lie and say we did it, or they will find other justifications if they are truly committed to doing a particular course of action, to decimating an agency, to firing X number of workers. And so I think that we have to fight smart, fight hard, not take the bait on every fight, and not be afraid to fight at the same time. And I think House Democrats are striking that balance as we did last week with the continuing resolution. But to step back, we have to recognize that in a moment like this, both because of the realities of the outcome of the last election, that Democrats are in the minority, but also because of the significance of the attacks on democracy and rule of law that we are seeing, that at the end of the day, elected officials alone cannot and will not save us. That the only way, as we have seen in countries around the world who face democratic backsliding, the only way to truly push back, to have a fighting chance, is through mass movements, through public outrage, public pressure, and public displays of opposition, through rallies and protests, through individuals lifting their voices, yes, to their own members of Congress, but also to their neighbors, to their communities, in their media, and yes, to their members of Congress. And that is the only way we have a fighting chance to survive the harms and to diminish the harms of this moment, so that come 2026 we can have a midterm where Democrats get the majority in the House, and 2028 we ultimately elect a Democratic president, and stop the bleeding. And it's going to take a long time to undo a lot of the harms here. It'll take, in some cases, decades to undo some of the harms because they're rooted in an erosion of trust. But we have to collectively lift our voices in this moment, and we've seen it work in other places.
That was such a great answer. Thank you so much. I think so many people, or at least Brad and I hear from so many people who are like, but what's happening? You guys are in DC. And it's like, there is so much happening. I swear to God, people are thinking about things. Very, very smart, talented people, like, and helping connect the dots from the inside and the outside and DC to the rest of the country, I think is really valuable. And that was great. Thank you. I'm ready to go, Brad. I have another question, unless I don't want to, you haven't, your adjectives haven't gotten the sunshine that I know you like to give them.
Well, look, I'm going to ask one more question because, and I know that Sarah probably won't want me to ask the question. That this is what I'm here to do. I am just an annoying person. But here's the thing, Sarah. And I know you probably don't like it because I know you and you're such an incredible human and earnest public servant. But what you represent in this moment is really inspiring and really beautiful. I don't know why I'm getting a little emotional. And when I saw the way that you handled being misgendered and the way you, with all of your grace and class, just like went right back at him, and the fact that you have elevated beyond the bathrooms and bullshit to focus on what really matters to your constituents in Delaware, and these Medicaid cuts and these bullshit, the hollowing out of the federal government, it's been inspiring to me. But also, I just want to let you know that like every community has a target on its back right now. And I just want to thank you for being in the fight. It's hard. And you're doing it with like, you're just like bulletproof. You're just like coming in there every day, bulletproof. And so I just want to thank you.
Well, I thank you. And when I announced my campaign in June of 2023, I knew that there would be members of Congress, some members who would want to use my service to claim 15 minutes of fame on social media. I knew that folks like me, writ large, are and would be under attack. I didn't anticipate that I'd be entering Congress after an election where hundreds of millions of dollars were specifically spent on this, on issues around people like me, and where the toxicity and the how emboldened people are in this moment would be at the scale that it is, to be cruel and mean and disrespectful to other people. And so in some ways, I do feel like I kind of go in every day with having to put armor on. And, the challenge with being a first is not only are you the only, but in order to make sure, as Kamala Harris says, that you're a first but not the last, You have to prove to people that people like you can do the job as well, if not even better than other people.
Yes.
And, with what's coming at me, it's a fluid situation, and each attack and each comment and each experience calls for a slightly different response. More often than not, it means not taking the bait. More often than not, it means calling them on their BS and saying, look, you want to talk about bathrooms because you don't want to talk about the fact that you're trying to gut Medicaid for 1 in 5 Americans. You want to talk about pronouns, and you want me to create a fight about pronouns because you don't want to talk about the fact that you're trying to gut healthcare for 1 in 2 kids in this country. You're trying to disrespect me and create a scene and a fight because you don't want to talk about the fact that qualified workers are being summarily fired from their jobs and left to, fend for themselves. And figuring out how to push back, when to push back, while also not falling into the trap of being completely consumed by those fights.
Yes.
And giving them what they want is a balancing act that sometimes I will get right and sometimes I will get wrong. The Madam Chair comment,
so good.
I've gotten a lot of positive feedback about it. I got to be honest, right after it, I really regretted it.
Really?
I worried that because I have tried with so much discipline and so much. I mean, it's required a lot of personal strength from me to sort of just let the comments and the targeting on my back just not faze me. And I worried that it would with one comment wipe away the perception of me as focused on my job and not taking the bait. But I think people saw it as it was authentically in that moment, which was a quick quip, and I was ready to move on with my questioning. And then the chair, decides that he's gonna, and I'm grateful for Representative Keating for always standing up for his colleagues. The chair self decides to adjourn the hearing.
Yeah.
I was ready to ask questions about nuclear disarmament and supporting democratic allies in Eastern Europe. Like, I made a quick joke, like, and that is, I think more than anything else too, my disappointment is I was ready to ask those questions and I was curious what the answers were going to be.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like the way that I would, in my own version of that type of experience, like being a Black woman at those times in society when race really gets injected into everything, right? Think about like 2020 and post George Floyd, and like you go through these peaks and these valleys where all of a sudden one facet of your life and your personality or your identity becomes the number one way that people interact with you. Like I got more free coffees in Brooklyn in 2020 than like you just everywhere you went, people be like, Black Lives Matter. And I'd be like, please stop. Like, this is so embarrassing for you. Just like, please stop. I will take that free coffee though. And did you have any pastries? But it becomes like, even just like how much labor you do thinking about it, and just we all have different personalities on different days, and we all have different moods, and it's like sometimes I have just like way less patience for anything that you have to say today than I might tomorrow. Like tomorrow I might be willing to be a little bit more charitable or a little bit more pragmatic or a little bit more whatever, but like you are as entitled as the rest of us or any of us are to be like, not today. Today we're doing things my way.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll get back to your turn tomorrow. So congratulations, but one of the things that you said earlier that I would love to get back to is that there's only really a handful of issues that really seem to break through to like general population. Like people who listen to this show, people who are following this are like our own special little nerdy weirdos. But there's been enough sort of public interaction between your regular Americans and things like Medicare and things like Medicaid and things like certain programs, that there's just a broad consciousness about them and opinion on them that's not easily corruptible. And so I would love to hear some of what, some of those examples of policies that you think are really ripe for us to be making progress on, to draw that distinction between us and what these yahoos are doing in the White House.
Yeah. I think what's clear to what we were talking about is that there is a sort of runway for our democracy right now. And our job is to, one, make that runway as long as possible for our democracy. And that is part of the litigation strategy, is to, if not stop, at least slow down the undermining of our democracy. And then not only to extend the runway, but to go down that runway sort of as slowly as possible. And in order to do that, we have to shift public opinion against the president. And I do think that when public opinion continues, I mean, it's already dropped 12 points. I saw on average 12 points since he was inaugurated. A significant decline. The public is turning against him, partly just because they're already exhausted by the chaos. They're already outraged by the blatant corruption. And they are obviously outraged by what we talked about, the efforts to gut Medicaid. They're outraged by the efforts to gut the efforts to gut cancer research, the efforts to fire veterans. They're genuinely outraged by that, and it is shifting public opinion. It is our job to continue to lift up those harms. And so for me, when I'm out in across Delaware, what I hear is first and foremost Medicaid. What I hear beyond that is fear around these federal funding freezes. And, people love Meals on Wheels here. People love the nonprofit that's providing housing supports for homeless veterans or folks struggling with addiction. People love those local nonprofits, and they are scared that they're going to lose funding. They're outraged that money that is guaranteed to our state or has been promised to those nonprofits that serve our communities are at risk. I hear about that a lot. I hear about both the fact that they are slashing, as the continuing resolution did, veterans benefits, and firing disproportionately in the decimation of the federal workforce veterans. That is resonating with folks. And look, I think for all of us, I started this answer talking about democracy. And I think all of us who are deep in this are really outraged by the illegal nature of the power grabs, the undermining of democratic values and institutions, the undermining of the rule of law. Unfortunately, that message doesn't resonate with the voters who we have to switch. And so we have to keep the main thing. And the main thing in this context, while it doesn't always feel as viscerally comforting to those of us who are also outraged by the democratic backsliding we're experiencing, our job right now is to really focus in on the economic toll, the financial toll that this administration is taking on Democrats, independents, and Republicans across the communities we represent.
Sarah, you mentioned Trump's approval ratings plummeting, but simultaneously, I saw a clip yesterday, Harry Enton, very dramatic pollster at CNN. I'm not sure if you guys are Harry Enton fans, but he did a whole thing. The Democratic Party is at its lowest approval rating since modern polling. Since 1992, the Democratic Party's approval rating is at 20%. Just to remind folks, so this is what happens, like in the like really rough periods of transitions, right, where a party has no power, where, speaking of, to your point, the levers of power, the Democratic Party doesn't have any. What are some signs of hope, though? I think you had mentioned everyday people. You had mentioned, champions like yourself and We're going to have our friend, another former White House friend, Senator Andy Kim, on in a few days. There are so many bright spots and so many bright stars like yourself. And yet at the same time, the party as a whole, for whatever reason, is not resonating with the American people. What would you advise the Democratic Party to do? I mean, we're going to keep spotlighting inspiring humans like you and remind people that you are a Democrat. It's like people somehow have that disconnect. They love their congressperson, but somehow they don't love the Democratic Party.
Well, and the polling for the party being as low as it is a byproduct of two things. One, pre-existing prior to November, I think we have done a poor job as Democrats of seeing the very real pain that exists across this country.
Yeah.
I think as a democratic ecosystem, some elected officials, advocacy groups, advocates, activists, people online, we fall into this trap of pursuing a competition for pain, where the left says to the right, what do you know about pain? My pain is real. And the right says to the left, what do you know about pain? My pain is real. And I know when I'm upset, when I am in pain, the worst thing that someone can say to me is, it's not as bad as you think. And it only makes me angrier. It only forces me to have to defend and explain my pain, which puts me into my pain. It makes me more frustrated. And it makes me resentful of the person who's saying, your pain isn't real.
Yeah.
And I do think that the party all of us have to do a better job of seeing the very real pain that exists across the political divide, across this country, and to say and live and exemplify the truth that we don't have to believe that people are right for what they're facing to be wrong. And we don't have to believe that folks are right for us to try to right that wrong. And I think we do a poor job of that. And the fact that we have sort of lost the perception that we are compassionate and care about the diverse, racially diverse, gender-wise, and diverse politically working class in this country, because too often we've diminished the pain of working class people who don't vote for us.
Yeah.
I think that needs to be solved for. But then on the flip side, the further decline in our support is among our own side that says we are not fighting hard enough. And I think we have to figure out, as we've talked about, how to fight hard and how to fight smart. And where I have landed is politics makes a lot more sense when you view, people say Donald Trump's not playing by the rules, Democrats play by the rules. I think the reality is Donald Trump's playing by the rules. It's not that he's not playing by the rules, but he's playing by the rules that Donald Trump and the Republicans are held to.
Yes.
We are held to different standards as parties. And those standards make a lot more sense if you understand them in the context and framework of sexism and misogyny, right? Democrats are treated and held to the standard of women in our society, and Republicans are held and treated to the standard of men in our society. It's why when Republicans are angry, when Republican politicians yell and scream, they're seen as strong. And when Democrats yell and scream, they're seen as hysterical or shrill, the loaded words that are so often associated with passionate women. Yeah. And what we have to do is figure out how to fight, but have our anger and our passion and our frustration heard as we want it to be heard. And I think the sweet spot for us is to fight and be passionate in defense of our constituents, because one area where you can be passionate about, as so often women who are navigating a world that is structured against their success realizes, is when you're protecting your community, when you're protecting your family, that is frustration and anger and passion that is received as intended by the public. And so we have to center our passion and our anger not at Donald Trump and what he's and who he is, as despicable as he is, but we have to center our frustration and our passion around what is happening to our constituents.
Yes,
what's happening to our flock, what is happening to our family that we are defending. And that will guarantee that we can fight back in the unfair framework and the unfair, disparate standards that the parties are held to in a way that is effective, authentic to who we are, and will be received and heard by the broader public the way we want it to be received and heard through.
Whoa. Okay. So that just blew my mind. I've actually never heard someone apply that framework to the parties. And it makes so
good.
much sense. Because, of course, and to your point, it doesn't work if we are passionate and defensive in about what they're doing, the ways that they're undermining democracy, because we've never had a social tolerance for women policing the behavior of men. Like, that is just not something that we are allowed to do. We are allowed to be incredibly defensive and upset and passionate and strong if we are protecting children, if we're protecting our family, if we're protecting our husbands or our sons. Like, that's we're allowed to pick all those fights all day long, but we are not allowed to tell grown men what to do ever under any circumstance. That is wild. I'm going to be sitting with that horrified all day. Oh my gosh.
One of the things that
thank you for that.
One of the things that I think illuminates for me is the fact that because of those standards and that reality of our politics and having to grapple with the world as it is, not just as we want it to be in order to build the future we want, that means that folks who have had to figure out how to navigate this world with double standards are going to be able to figure out the path forward and figure out how to message and fight in a way that is effective.
Yes.
Totally. Absolutely.
Reach.
So how do you think that translates? I'm sure you get this question all the time, or I would project that you get this all the time from constituents of just like, well, what should I do? I'm Sally Q, school teacher. I have influence in particular ways, but I'm not a big donor. I don't run media. I'm not the head of some sort of civic organization. Like, what should I just be doing in this moment to help support you, Sarah McBride, to help support the broader cause? Like, where's my role in all of this?
So, this goes back directly to what we were saying, which is that when we see the democratic backsliding we see in other countries, South Korea, Poland, when we see it when we saw Netanyahu seeking to undermine the independence of the judiciary, when we see democratic backsliding, it's through wide-scale public pressure that those efforts get defeated or slowed down or reversed. And there are groups across this country that are mobilizing folks. I have to be careful because of physically where I am about what I specifically say in this moment.
Right.
But folks engaging in direct action, folks reaching out to their own member of Congress, but also folks remaining in proximity to and in conversation with not only like-minded friends that live in other places, including more conservative places in this country, and talking with them about the stakes and the options before them to have their voices heard, but also remaining in conversation with folks who think and live and vote differently than they do. Because I think one of the challenges we see in this moment is sort of this performative allyship where people say, if you disagree with me, or if you hold a position that I find offensive, I'm cutting you out of my life. Now, I think if the position that's offensive directly impacts your own life, that's one thing. But I don't want all of my friends to cut out anti-trans friends of theirs, because that means their anti-trans friend will have no one there to hold them accountable, to educate them, to push them.
Yes.
And so I encourage folks to stay in relationship, stay in proximity to people who think and vote differently than they do, so they can have those conversations. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't change every heart and every mind. You won't win every debate. You might not even win them over. But people need to know that there is a different way of thinking. There's a different way of voting. They need to be held accountable for their actions and given the opportunity to grow and to change and to evolve. And that only happens if we can maintain in our democracy our capacity to have conversations across difference of opinion. Because I think, and I'll close with this, if we do that, I do believe that we can turn this moment into what my friend in Florida, who is an advocate, called a slingshot moment, where yes, we are pulled backwards, but
Yes.
tension and pressure of being pulled backwards ultimately propels us to destinations that we've not yet been.
Oh, I love the slingshot moment, Sarah.
That's
That's
great.
good. That's really
That is
good.
so
And also,
fantastic.
it's hopeful, especially for someone, my parents are Trump voters. So what you just said resonates. I think there are a lot of people who have that. Do I cut people out of my life? And you know what? I can't. I don't have the choice of cutting my parents out of my life. I love them. I love them dearly. And there are a lot of people, to your point, who I think are waking up and realizing that they were sold a fake bill of goods once again, you know?
Yes.
And your leadership in this moment, the fact that you are able, again, to see the hope and see the love in people that they haven't even found yet is it's firing me up. So thank you so much. We know how busy you are. Twig, do you have any final words for Congresswoman McBride? Look, we are in DC, or at least I'm in DC, Sarah. We would love to have you back all the time. Whenever you can squeeze us in, just
Would
keep
love
coming
that.
back.
That's right.
Would
You got a little
absolutely love that.
rant you want to give to the people? We're here for
Exactly.
you. We're here
Oh,
for
I
you.
have, as my team will tell you, there'll be like a different weekly rant that I have. Right now, my rant is around the different standards of in politics,
It's
right?
such a good one. That's such a
So
good one.
good.
I do have two quick questions. One is there's a sort of reputation, at least amongst staffers or people who really follow closely in DC, that there's just like a fundamental disingenuousness on behalf of the right, and particularly MAGA people, particularly the ones who do lots of media appearances, right? That they will just say the most outrageous stuff on TV, but then when you meet them, they're like, "Hey, Carrie, how you doing? Your son okay?" Or whatever, like whatever the thing is, and that they think of it as theater and they think of it as behavior, and that they just don't actually, they're just like, we're playing this game, none of this matters, right? You see that from Donald Trump all the time. He's just like trying to entertain people and saying the most outlandish stuff, and then immediately he'll be like, well, I didn't mean it, I was just television. Is that turning out, like, is that true? Is that an experience that you're having where people are like, no?
This was my rant 3 weeks ago. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I mean, the reality that we see among many people in Congress is that this is a reality show. And it's
Yeah.
not a competition reality show, it's a Bravo reality show. And it is, when you watch Real Housewives, what is the way to get airtime? And that is the goal for so many of these folks. What is the way to get airtime? It's to pick a fight with someone. It's to throw wine in their face. That is, for some of these members, the beginning and end of this. It is to get attention. It is to get clicks. It is to get likes. It is to win the competition for attention. It's not to do good. It's not to make change. It's not to help their constituents. It's to get the adrenaline rush and the dopamine of a like, and then maybe create a platform that when you leave politics, you can go get, a Newsmax show or a Fox News show, or
Right.
be an influencer online. One of the most disheartening things is seeing that reality show up close and seeing how people will be kind and reasonable and even openly, acknowledge the absurdity of what's going on, of Donald Trump, and then go on TV or when the cameras are present, put on not even a different air, but a complete character.
Yeah.
That's disheartening. But I think it also is politically possible because too many of our own fellow citizens have given up on politics as a means to do good and say, well, if politics isn't going to impact my life, if it's not going to actually solve my problems, then at least I want it to be entertaining. And so it's a charge for us to inoculate the country to not only Donald Trump, but sort of Trumpism, including the reality show nature of it, is to do that, we have to make government work. We have to actually deliver for folks. And we've got to deliver for folks in a way that feels tangible and concrete. I think a lot of times, partly because of, I think what happened with Build Back Better is a prime example. As wonderful as the IRA was, the Inflation Reduction Act was, investments, long-term investments in green technology and the green economy both feel abstract to folks, and for most people doesn't actually touch their lives. What fell out of the Build Back Better Act would have affordable childcare, paid family and medical leave, housing. Those policies are tangible, concrete, and in many cases, discernible new programs that people can go, Democrats created those. And so it's my belief that when we have the opportunity, we have to prioritize policies that are concrete, discernible, tangible, directly, impacting people's lives on the issues that keep them up at night and that have an immediate and direct impact on working people and families across this country, like childcare, paid leave, housing, and healthcare.
Congresswoman, we have to let you go. You have already given us more of the time than your team gave us. So we thank you so much. And just to let you know, we did like an informal poll of our listeners and you were at the top of the list. Everyone wanted to hear from you. So we're giving Twigg and Jenkins family what they want. And we're here for you. We support you. We're here for you. And thank you so much. We love you, Sarah.
Both. Love you too.
Thank you. So good to see you.
Good to see
Bye,
you.
guys.
Bye. Awesome.
Oh, that was great. Thank you so much.
We did it.
Thank you for having me.